My mother's voice came through my phone at 2 a.m., 3 years after I buried her. I'm Sadie Monroe. I'm 28 years old. I work as a pediatric nurse in a small hospital outside Columbus, Ohio. I live alone in the house where I grew up, the same house where I watched my mother take her last breath in a hospital bed we set up in the living room. I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghosts. I don't watch horror movies. I don't read my horoscope. I double-check that the doors are locked every night, and I keep a baseball bat next to my bed. Not because I'm scared, but because I'm careful. I've always been careful. So when I tell you what happened that night, I need you to understand something. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't having some kind of breakdown. I was wide awake, standing in my hallway at 2 a.m., staring at my phone screen while my dead mother's name flashed across it. And when I finally looked through the peephole, she was standing right there on my porch. Same face, same gray cardigan she was buried in, same soft eyes that used to check on me when I had nightmares as a kid. Then she said something that made my blood turn cold, something that only she could possibly know. I know how this sounds. I know you're probably already coming up with explanations. A scam caller, a cruel prank, grief playing tricks on my mind. I thought all of those things too. I wanted to believe any of them, but none of those explanations could account for what she said next. Before I tell you the rest of this story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I read every single comment, and I want to know who's here with me tonight. Now let me take you back to the beginning. The night it happened was a Thursday in late February. I remember because I had just worked a double shift at the hospital, 16 hours straight, and my feet hurt so bad I could barely walk to my car. We were short-staffed that week. We're always short-staffed, but that week was worse than usual. 2 nurses called in sick, and we had a little boy in the ICU who wasn't doing well. I spent most of my shift sitting with him, holding his hand, telling him stories about superheroes while his parents took turns crying in the hallway. By the time I clocked out, it was almost midnight. The drive home took 20 minutes, and I don't remember most of it. I was running on coffee and adrenaline, and all I could think about was my bed. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. I'd left the porch light on that morning, but the bulb must have burned out. I made a mental note to replace it and then immediately forgot. I was too tired to care about anything except getting inside and lying down. I didn't turn on any lights when I walked in. I knew the layout of that house better than I knew my own face. I could walk from the front door to my bedroom with my eyes closed. I'd been doing it since I was 5 years old. The house still smelled like her sometimes. My mother, Ramiz Monroe. She wore this lavender lotion every single day, and even though she'd been gone for 3 years, I swear I could still catch a hint of it in certain rooms. The bathroom, the kitchen, her old bedroom, which I still hadn't cleaned out. I kept telling myself I'd get to it eventually, but eventually never came. My mom raised me alone. My father left when I was 12. His name was Dean, and I don't talk about him much because there isn't much to say. One day he was there, and the next day he wasn't. He didn't leave a note. He didn't call to explain. He just packed a bag while I was at school and disappeared. My mom came home from work and found half the closet empty. She sat on the edge of their bed for a long time, just staring at the space where his clothes used to be. I watched her from the doorway, too scared to say anything. She never cried about it. Not in front of me anyway. She just got up the next morning and made me breakfast like nothing had happened. Scrambled eggs and toast, same as always. And when I asked her where Dad was, she looked at me with those calm, steady eyes and said, "It's just us now, sweetheart. But that's okay. We're going to be just fine." And we were. We really were. My mom worked as a seamstress. She did alterations for a dry cleaner downtown, hemming pants and taking in wedding dresses and fixing zippers on winter coats. The work wasn't glamorous, and it didn't pay much, but she was good at it. Her hands were always moving, always busy. Even when she watched TV at night, she'd have some piece of fabric in her lap, stitching away at something. We had our routines, me and her. Sunday mornings were for pancakes. She made them from scratch, with blueberries if they were in season. Friday nights were for old movies. She loved anything with Audrey Hepburn. We'd sit on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between us, and she'd recite half the lines from memory. And every single night before I went to bed, she'd say the same thing. I love you to the spoon and back. It started when I was 7. I was trying to say, I love you to the moon and back, but I messed up the words. I said spoon instead of moon, and my mom laughed so hard she had to sit down. After that, it became our thing, our private joke. She wrote it in every birthday card. She said it at the end of every phone call. When I graduated from nursing school, she handed me a small gift box with a silver spoon inside, and I cried harder than I'd ever cried in my life. The last time I heard those words was 3 years ago, in the living room of this house, 6 hours before she died. She was so weak by then. The cancer had spread everywhere, and the doctors said there was nothing left to do except keep her comfortable. We brought in a hospital bed and set it up by the window so she could see the bird feeder in the front yard. She loved watching the cardinals. She said they reminded her of her mother. I was sitting next to her, holding her hand, when she opened her eyes and looked at me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Sadie. I leaned in closer. I'm here, Mom. I'm right here. She smiled, just a little. To the spoon and back, baby. Those were her last words to me. She closed her eyes after that, and she didn't open them again. I thought I'd never hear that phrase again. I thought it died with her, locked away in a memory that only I could access. I was wrong. The night everything changed, I went to bed around 12:30. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't watch TV. I just kicked off my shoes, pulled the blanket over my head, and let the exhaustion drag me under. I didn't dream that night. I never dream when I'm that tired. There's just darkness, heavy and thick, like sinking into deep water. And then, at 2:07 a.m., my phone rang. The sound cut through my sleep like a knife. I wasn't the kind of person who slept through phone calls. Working at a hospital trained that out of me years ago. When your phone rings in the middle of the night, it usually means something bad has happened to someone. I reached for my phone on the nightstand without opening my eyes. My fingers found it on the second try, and I pulled it toward my face, squinting at the bright screen in the darkness. For a moment, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The name on the screen said, Mom. Not Mom, old number, or Mom's phone, like some people save contacts after someone dies. Just Mom. The same way I'd saved it when I was 16 and got my first cell phone. I stared at that name for what felt like a full minute. The phone kept ringing, vibrating in my hand like something alive. I knew I should answer it. I knew I should do something, but my body wouldn't cooperate. It was like being trapped in that space between sleeping and waking, where nothing feels quite real. The call went to voicemail. The screen went dark. I sat there in the silence, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself it was a glitch. Phone companies reused old numbers all the time. Some stranger had been assigned my mother's old number, and they'd accidentally called me. That was the only explanation that made sense. That was the only explanation I was willing to accept. I was about to put the phone down and try to convince myself to go back to sleep when it rang again. Same name, same number, Mom. This time I answered. I didn't say anything at first. I just held the phone to my ear and listened. There was silence on the other end, but not the empty silence of a deadline. It was the kind of silence that meant someone was there, waiting. Then I heard her voice. Sadie? Sweetie, it's Mom. My whole body went cold. It wasn't just that the voice sounded like her. It was her. The exact tone she used when she called me on my lunch breaks at work. The slight rasp that developed in her throat during the last year of her life, when the cancer started affecting everything. The way she stretched out the word, sweetie, turning it into something warm and soft. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there in my dark bedroom, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles ached. Baby, I'm outside. The voice continued. It's so cold out here. Can you let me in? I hung up. I didn't decide to do it. My thumb just moved on its own, ending the call like it was trying to protect me from something my brain couldn't handle. I dropped the phone on the bed and pressed both hands against my face. I was shaking. My teeth were chattering even though the room wasn't cold. I told myself I was dreaming. I had to be dreaming. This was some kind of stress-induced nightmare. And any second now, I would wake up for real, and everything would be normal. But I could feel the sheets against my legs. I could hear the radiator clanking in the corner of the room. Everything was too detailed, too solid, too present to be a dream. 30 seconds passed, maybe a minute, and then I heard it. 3 slow knocks on the front door. Knock, 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 spaced out and deliberate, exactly the way my mother always knocked. She never rang the doorbell. She said doorbells were impersonal. She always knocked 3 times, slow and patient, like she had all the time in the world. I got out of bed. I don't know why. Every horror movie I'd ever seen told me to stay where I was, to call the police, to hide under the covers like a child. But something pulled me forward, some combination of fear and desperate, irrational hope that I couldn't control. The hallway was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked toward the front door like I was moving through water, each step heavy and slow. The brass peephole glinted in the faint light coming through the window. My mother had installed it herself when I was 15, after a stranger knocked on our door asking for money and scared us both half to death. I pressed my eye to the peephole and looked outside. She was standing on the porch, bathed in the yellow glow of the streetlight at the end of the driveway. Gray cardigan, silver hair pinned back the way she always wore it, hands clasped in front of her, patient and still. My mother, 3 years dead, standing on my porch at 2 a.m., waiting for me to let her in. I backed away from the door so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. My shoulder hit the wall behind me, and I stood there pressed against it like the door might burst open at any second. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps, and I could feel tears building behind my eyes, even though I wasn't sure why I wanted to cry. My mind was racing through every possible explanation. A twin sister my mother never told me about. Some kind of elaborate prank orchestrated by someone who hated me. A mental breakdown brought on by stress and exhaustion, and the fact that the anniversary of her death was only 4 days away. None of these explanations made sense, but neither did anything else that was happening. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands and pulled up my contacts. I scrolled until I found Aunt Delia, my mother's younger sister. She lived about 20 minutes away in a small apartment complex near the highway. She and my mom had been close, talking on the phone almost every day until the cancer made conversation too exhausting. After my mom died, Delia checked on me constantly, bringing casseroles I didn't eat and offering company I didn't want. I'd pushed her away more than I should have, but she never stopped trying. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Sadie, what's wrong? It's the middle of the night." I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out as a whisper. "Someone's at my door. They look like Mom." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Delia shifting, probably sitting up in bed. "What do you mean they look like your mom?" "Sadie, you're scaring me." I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't have words for what I'd just seen through that peephole. "I don't know what's happening. I got a phone call from her number. Her voice was on the line. And now someone who looks exactly like her is standing on my porch." Delia's voice turned sharp and alert, all traces of sleep gone. "Listen to me carefully. Do not open that door. Do you understand? Stay away from the door. I'm calling the police. And then I'm coming over. Don't move until I get there." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in the hallway, clutching my phone, trying to convince myself that help was on the way and everything would be fine. But even as I thought it, I knew I couldn't just stand there and wait. The person on the porch knew things. She knew my mother's phone number. She knew how my mother knocked. She sounded exactly like my mother. I needed to understand how any of this was possible. And then her voice came through the door, muffled but clear. "Sadie, I know you're scared. I know none of this makes sense. But I need you to trust me. Ask me something. Ask me something only I would know." I pressed my back harder against the wall. My heart was beating so fast it actually hurt. I thought about all the things I could ask. My mother's birthday, her maiden name, the hospital where she spent her final days. But anyone could find that information with a quick internet search. If this was some kind of scam, some cruel trick designed to break me, they would have done their research. I needed something else, something private. Something I had never told another living soul. I moved closer to the door, just close enough that my voice would carry through the wood. What did you say to me the night before my 8th grade graduation, when I was crying in the bathroom? Silence. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence, and I thought maybe I had caught her. Maybe this imposter had finally reached the limit of whatever game she was playing. Then she spoke. I told you that your father leaving wasn't your fault. You asked me once if it was because you weren't a boy. You thought maybe he wanted a son instead of a daughter. You never said it again, but I never forgot. I told you that you were the only thing I ever did right. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my back against the cold plaster, tears streaming down my face. I had never written those words down. I had never spoken them to a therapist or a friend or anyone. That memory lived only in my head, locked away in a place I never visited because it hurt too much. Whoever was standing on my porch had just unlocked it. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor. It could have been 30 seconds or 5 minutes. Time had stopped making sense. All I could hear was my own breathing and the blood rushing in my ears. The words she had spoken kept echoing in my head, playing on a loop I couldn't stop. She knew. She knew the one thing nobody else in the world could possibly know. I got to my feet slowly, using the wall for support. My legs felt weak and unsteady, like I had just run a marathon. I walked to the door and stood in front of it, staring at the locks my mother had installed years ago. 2 deadbolts and a chain. She always said you could never be too careful. I wondered what she would think if she could see me now, standing here in the middle of the night, about to open the door for someone who might be her ghost. My hands moved before my brain could talk me out of it. I turned the first deadbolt, then the second. I slid the chain out of its track and let it hang loose against the frame. And then I turned the handle and pulled the door open. She was standing right there, just a few feet away from me. The porch light from the neighbor's house cast a soft glow across her face, and I could see every detail. The fine lines around her eyes, the small scar on her chin from a cooking accident when I was 10, the way her gray hair curled slightly at the ends, because she never could get it to lie flat. She looked exactly like my mother. Exactly. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there in the doorway, staring at this impossible woman who wore my mother's face like it belonged to her. The cold February air rushed past her and into the house, but I barely felt it. "You're not real," I finally managed to whisper. "You can't be real." I watched her die. I held her hand while she took her last breath. I picked out the dress she was buried in. The woman's eyes filled with tears, and something about that broke me even more. Ghosts weren't supposed to cry. Hallucinations weren't supposed to look so heartbroken. "I'm real," she said. "I'm just not who you think I am. Can I come inside? Please. I'll explain everything." I stepped back without saying anything, and she walked past me into the house. She moved carefully, looking around at the walls and the furniture like she was seeing it all for the first time. Her fingers brushed against the back of the couch, and she paused in front of the mantel where I kept my mother's photograph. "She was beautiful," she said quietly. "I always wondered what she looked like." I closed the door behind her and leaned against it. "Who are you?" She turned to face me, and I could see the resemblance even more clearly now. Same height, same build, same way of holding her hands clasped in front of her body. But there were differences too. Tiny things I hadn't noticed through the peephole. Her eyebrows were slightly thinner. Her posture was a little straighter. She carried herself like someone who had lived a different life. "My name is Marlena," she said. "Marlena Davis, and I'm your mother's twin sister." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I shook my head, refusing to accept what she was saying. "That's impossible. My mother didn't have a twin. She didn't have any siblings except Aunt Delia. She didn't know about me," Marlena said. "Neither of us knew. We were separated at birth, different adoptions, different families, different states. I grew up in Vermont with parents who loved me, and I never knew I had a sister until 6 months ago." She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly and held it out to me. It was a DNA test result from one of those ancestry websites. I'd seen commercials for them 100 times. The paper showed a match, a 99.98% probability of a full sibling relationship with someone named Renata Monroe. I found her too late, Marlena continued, her voice breaking. By the time I tracked her down, she was already gone. I missed her by 3 years. 3 years, Sadie. I had a sister my whole life and I never got to meet her. I took the paper from her hands and stared at it. The numbers blurred as tears filled my eyes. This woman wasn't a ghost. She wasn't a hallucination or a scam artist or some cruel trick. She was my mother's other half, the piece of her that had been missing all along. The phone number, I said. How did you get her phone number? Marlena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I contacted the phone company. I told them I was settling her estate and needed the number reactivated for records purposes. They believed me. I just wanted something that connected me to her. I never meant to scare you. I've been watching you for weeks, trying to find the courage to introduce myself. Tonight I saw your lights go off and I panicked. I called before I could stop myself. I'm so sorry. I looked at her face again, searching for my mother in her features. She was there. She was everywhere. The sound of sirens broke the silence between us. Red and blue lights flashed through the front window, painting the walls in alternating colors. A few seconds later, there was a loud knock at the door, and I heard Aunt Delia's voice calling my name. I opened the door to find her standing there with 2 police officers behind her, her face pale and terrified. Sadie, are you okay? What's going on? Who's in there with you? I stepped aside so she could see Marlena standing in the living room. Delia froze in the doorway, her mouth falling open. She grabbed the door frame to steady herself, and I watched the color drain from her face completely. She looked like she had just seen a ghost, which I suppose she thought she had. Oh my God, she whispered. Renata? No, I said quietly. Her name is Marlena. She's Mom's twin sister. What followed was the longest night of my life. The police officers took statements from all of us, while Delia sat on the couch in stunned silence. Marlena explained everything again, showing the DNA results and the photograph she carried in her wallet. It was an old picture, faded and worn at the edges. 2 baby girls in matching yellow onesies, lying side by side in a hospital bassinet. On the back, someone had written in careful handwriting that I recognized immediately as my grandmother's. Renata and Marlena, together, always. Delia couldn't stop crying. She kept saying she had no idea, that their mother had never mentioned anything about a twin, that she couldn't believe this secret had been buried for so long. I sat beside her and held her hand while she processed the shock. I understood exactly how she felt because I was feeling it too. The officers left around 4 a.m. after determining that no crime had been committed. Just a family reunion that had gone about it in the strangest possible way. Marlena apologized again for scaring me, and this time I believed her. I could see the regret in her eyes, the desperate loneliness of someone who had spent her whole life feeling incomplete without knowing why. In the days that followed, Marlena and I began the slow and careful work of getting to know each other. She told me about her life in Vermont, where she had worked as an elementary school teacher for 30 years before retiring. She had been married once to a man named Richard, who died of a heart attack 8 years ago. They never had children, something she said she always regretted. She showed me pictures of her house, her garden, her 2 cats named Pepper and Sage. She liked crossword puzzles and old movies and lavender tea, which made me smile because my mother had loved all of those things too. I told her about my mom. I told her about the Sunday pancakes and the Friday night movies and the silver spoon she gave me at my graduation. I told her about the cancer and the hospital bed in the living room and the way my mother looked at the cardinals outside the window like they were old friends. Marlena listened to every word with tears rolling down her cheeks. She was grieving someone she had never met, mourning a lifetime of memories she would never get to make. 4 days after that strange night, the 3rd anniversary of my mother's death arrived. Marlena and I drove to the cemetery together in the early morning light. The grass was still wet with dew, and the air smelled like rain. We stood in front of my mother's headstone side by side, neither of us speaking for a long time. Finally, I broke the silence. Mom, this is your sister. She found her way back to us. Marlena placed a small bouquet of lavender on the grave. Her hands were trembling. I wish I could have known you, she said softly, but I'm going to take care of your daughter, I promise. We stayed there for almost an hour, talking to my mother like she could hear us. Maybe she could. I don't know what I believe about those things anymore. When we got back to my car, Marlena hugged me tight. It felt strange and familiar at the same time, like holding onto a piece of my mother I thought I had lost forever. Before she let go, I whispered in her ear, "To the spoon and back." She pulled away and looked at me with confusion in her eyes. I smiled through my tears. "I'll explain. We have time now." Grief had convinced me that I would never hear my mother's voice again. I thought that part of my life was closed forever, sealed away in memories that would only fade with time. But I was wrong. Love doesn't end when someone dies. It just finds new ways to reach you. Sometimes it shows up on your porch at 2 a.m, wearing your mother's face and carrying secrets that were buried for decades. Marlena visits me every month now. She's teaching me how to garden, and I'm teaching her how to make my mother's blueberry pancakes. We're building something new out of something that was lost, and I think my mom would be proud of both of us. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment telling me about a time when someone unexpected came into your life and changed everything. I read every single comment, and I love hearing your stories. Some people come into our lives exactly when we need them most. We just have to be brave enough to open the door.